Millionaire Cowboy finds freezing nurse at train station. Their love story made history. The winter wind cut through the small train station in Wyoming like a knife. Most people hurried inside the warm waiting room, but one woman remained outside on the wooden bench. Her thin coat wasn't nearly enough for the freezing night. Sarah Collins pulled the sleeves tighter around her hands and tried to stop shivering. She had been waiting for the late train for almost an hour. It was already past midnight. Her shift at the hospital had ended late, and the last bus had left. The train was her only way home. Across the parking lot, a black pickup truck rolled slowly to a stop. The man behind the wheel noticed her immediately. Jacob Turner wasn't just another traveler. In Wyoming, everyone knew his name. He owned thousands of acres of ranch land, several cattle businesses, and a growing chain of agricultural companies. Newspapers often called him the Millionaire Cowboy. But despite the wealth, Jacob still wore the same worn boots and denim jacket he had owned for years. He noticed something strange. Everyone else had gone inside, but the woman on the bench stayed outside in the freezing wind. Jacob stepped out of the truck. The cold air hit his face as he walked toward her. "Ma'am," he said gently, "you're going to freeze sitting out here." Sarah looked up, surprised. "Oh, I'm fine," she said politely, though her teeth were clearly chattering. Jacob shook his head. "You don't look fine." She smiled awkwardly. "I just finished a hospital shift. The waiting room is packed, and I didn't want to take someone else's seat." That answer caught his attention. "You're a nurse?" "Yes." He studied her for a moment. Her hands were red from the cold, and her shoes were worn from long hours of standing. Without another word, Jacob removed his heavy ranch coat and handed it to her. "Oh no, I can't take that," Sarah said quickly. "You're not taking it," he replied calmly. "You're borrowing it." She hesitated, then accepted. The warmth spread instantly through her arms. "Thank you," she whispered. Jacob sat down on the other end of the bench. For a few minutes, they said nothing while snowflakes drifted down from the dark sky. Finally, he asked, "Long shift?" 12 hours, she said. "Emergency room?" She nodded. "You can always tell by the shoes," Jacob said with a small smile. That made her laugh softly. The train still hadn't arrived. "Where are you headed?" he asked. "Cheyenne," she said. "Small apartment near the hospital." Jacob frowned slightly. "That train rides almost an hour." "Yeah," she sighed, "but it's cheaper than driving." The wind blew harder. Jacob looked at the empty tracks, then back at her. "You know," he said slowly, "I'm heading toward Cheyenne anyway." Sarah blinked. "You are?" "Yep." She hesitated. Normally she would never accept a ride from a stranger, but something about him felt calm, honest. Still, she shook her head. "I don't want to bother you." Jacob stood up and opened the truck door. "You wouldn't be bothering me," he said. "You'd be saving me from waiting for a train that's probably late anyway." She looked at the snowy tracks again, then at the warm truck. Finally, she nodded. The drive started quietly, but somewhere along the dark Wyoming highway, they began talking about long hospital shifts, about ranch life, about the strange loneliness that sometimes comes with hard work. By the time they reached Cheyenne, neither of them wanted the conversation to end. Jacob parked outside her apartment building. She handed his coat back. "Thank you for saving me from freezing tonight," she said. He smiled. "Anytime." As she stepped out of the truck, Jacob suddenly said something that surprised even himself. "Hey, if you ever want to visit a ranch instead of a train station, I know a pretty good one." Sarah laughed. "I might take you up on that." Neither of them knew it yet, but that freezing night at a quiet train station would become the beginning of a love story people in Wyoming would talk about for decades. Sarah didn't expect to hear from Jacob again. Men sometimes offered polite invitations after chance meetings, but life usually moved on. The next morning she returned to the hospital for another 12-hour shift and tried to forget the warm truck ride through the snowy Wyoming night. But 3 days later, during her lunch break, her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She almost ignored it. Instead, she answered. "Hello." A calm voice replied. "Hi, Sarah? It's Jacob, the guy with the truck and the ranch coat." She smiled immediately. The millionaire cowboy. Jacob laughed on the other end. "People say that, but I mostly just clean up after cows." "So what's up?" she asked. "Well," he said, slightly hesitant, "you mentioned you rarely get a day off, but if you ever do, I thought you might want to see what a real Wyoming ranch looks like." Sarah looked around the busy hospital cafeteria. Her life had become a routine of long shifts, exhaustion, and quiet evenings alone in her small apartment. A ranch visit sounded like another world. When she asked, "Saturday," Jacob said, "if you're free." For the first time in weeks, she actually felt excited about something. "Okay," she said. Saturday morning, Jacob arrived exactly on time. The same black pickup truck pulled up outside her apartment, but this time Sarah noticed something she had missed before. The truck was spotless, not the vehicle of someone careless, but of someone who took pride in everything he owned. The drive out of the city took nearly an hour. When they finally reached the ranch gates, Sarah's eyes widened. Rolling hills stretched across thousands of acres. Horses ran along wooden fences while cattle grazed across the open fields. "This is yours?" she asked in disbelief. Jacob shrugged. "My family built it over 3 generations." He showed her the barns, the stables, and the wide wooden house overlooking the valley. But what surprised Sarah most wasn't the land. It was Jacob. Despite the wealth, he worked beside every ranch hand, fixing fences, feeding horses, checking cattle. No expensive suits, no arrogance, just a man who loved his land. At one point, they sat on a wooden fence watching the sunset over the hills. Sarah wrapped her arms around herself against the evening breeze. "You know," she said quietly, "most wealthy people I've met in hospitals barely notice the nurses." Jacob looked at her. "That's because they've never watched someone save a life." She blinked. "How do you know nurses save lives?" "My mother was one," he said softly. The moment changed something between them. 2 strangers from completely different worlds suddenly understood each other. As the sun dipped below the Wyoming hills, Sarah realized something she hadn't felt in years: peace. And as Jacob drove her home that night, neither of them said it out loud. But both of them knew the freezing night at that train station hadn't just been a random meeting. It had been the beginning of something neither of them expected, and something that would soon change both of their lives forever.